So let's just jump right in. We're starting with a pretty explosive quote from the creators of the material for today's explainer. They're saying their movie, which is all about this grand, unified conspiracy theory, gets banned from social media pretty much every time they post it. That's a bold claim, and it really sets the stage for the controversial ideas we're about to unpack. Welcome to The Explainer. So, what are we getting into today? We're going to break down a really viral and frankly very polarizing movie that's been making the rounds, all about what it calls the conspiracy theory of everything. It basically tries to weave dozens of different fringe ideas into one single massive story. Now look, our job here isn't to tell you if it's true or false. We're just here to explain the theory, exactly as it's presented in the source. All right, so here's our roadmap. First, we'll tackle the core idea, an illusion of reality. Then, we'll dig into the so-called architecture of control. After that, we'll look at a major case study, the deep state's shadow. And finally, we'll explore how the theory says you can break free from within. Okay, first up, an illusion of reality. And this really is the foundation of the entire theory. You kind of have to get this part because everything else we're going to talk about, it all stacks right on top of this one big idea. So the whole thing hinges on this really old concept from Gnosticism. It's called the demiurge. Think of it like a lesser creator, a consciousness that built the physical universe we're all in. But, and this is the most important part, it's not the real God, not the ultimate source of everything. It's presented as a sort of false God that's trapped our consciousness in a flawed material world. To help you wrap your head around that, the source uses an analogy pretty much everyone knows: the Matrix. Yep, the movie. The idea is exactly that the world you see and feel every day is actually an artificial reality. It's a system designed specifically to keep us disconnected from a higher, more authentic existence. So this sets up a huge contrast, a fundamental split in reality. On one hand, you have the physical universe, which the theory says is this incomplete material trap. And on the other, you have what it calls the supreme oneness. That's the real deal, the true higher reality where everything, even the demiurge, originally came from. The core argument is, as long as we mistake the illusion for the real thing, we're stuck. So how does this illusion even work? The theory uses that ancient principle, as above, so below. It suggests reality is layered. Think of it like computer code. You've got all this incredibly complex code running in the background. That's the above. But what you actually see on your screen is a simple interactive world. That's the below. The theory argues our physical reality is just like that screen, generated by a much deeper, more fundamental quantum reality. All right, so if we're living in this giant illusion designed to trap us, the big question is, how is it kept going? Who or what is maintaining it? That brings us right into our next section, the architecture of control. This is all about the alleged methods used to keep us all in the dark. And the theory lists a whole bunch of things. It talks about keeping us in a state of fear and scarcity through the news. It points to a toxic food supply meant to keep us subdued, subliminal messages hidden in movies and music, mass surveillance, the whole shebang. But one of the biggest ones it zeroes in on is fluoride in our drinking water. Yeah, fluoride is a huge deal in this theory. And you might wonder, why fluoride of all things? Well, according to the source, it's because it supposedly calcifies the pineal gland. In a lot of spiritual traditions, the pineal gland is seen as the third eye, our biological antenna, if you will, to higher consciousness. So the claim is, if you calcify it, you sever that spiritual connection. You're cut off. And to back this up, the source brings in this quote from a chemist named Charles Perkins. He supposedly wrote that giving people small, repeated doses of fluoride will eventually make them more submissive, less able to resist being controlled. The idea is that it's a slow, steady process to make a population more docile. The key takeaway, according to the theory, is the alleged intent behind its use. The source then tries to put some numbers on this. It points to research claiming that fluoride is linked to a 7-point drop in IQ in children, that it can slash our melatonin production, and, here's the critical one for the theory, that it can increase the calcification of that all-important pineal gland by as much as 50%. Okay, so we've covered the alleged methods of control. Now, let's look at a massive, real-world event the theory uses as its prime example. This next section is called the Deep State's Shadow, and it presents the events of 9/11 as a case study in how this hidden influence supposedly works. The way the source kicks this section off is with a pretty startling number. It claims that 42% of Americans believe that the government concealed or ignored key evidence about the 9/11 attacks. By leading with this, it's basically saying, see, a lot of people already doubt the official story, which, of course, opens the door for an alternative explanation. So here's the alternative timeline the theory lays out. It starts before the attacks, with what it calls highly unusual stock trades on the exact airlines involved, suggesting someone knew what was coming. It highlights what it claims were significant delays in the response from NORAD and the FAA that morning. Then it gets to the collapses of the towers themselves, pointing out their near free-fall speed. And of course, the big one, the collapse of World Trade Center 7 later that day, a building that was never even hit by a plane. And all of that leads to the massive question at the heart of this whole section of the theory, a controlled demolition. Was it really just the fires that brought those buildings down in that way, or was something else going on? The source doesn't just ask the question, it argues pretty forcefully that it was a controlled demolition. So if you're going to make a claim that huge, what's the evidence? Well, the theory's supposed smoking gun is this. It claims independent researchers analyzed dust samples from Ground Zero and found unreacted nanothermite, a military-grade explosive. And that, the theory says, is the only thing that explains the rapid, symmetrical, total collapse of those buildings. Okay, so we've just gone through this vast, dark, complicated web of control and illusion. It's a lot to take in. But this is where your entire narrative takes a sharp turn and starts talking about a solution. So let's get into the final part, breaking free from within. And this is a really crucial pivot. After all that talk about external forces and shadowy groups, the ultimate message is that true liberation isn't about fighting them. No, it says the real battle is internal. It's about winning the fight for control over your own consciousness. Because according to this theory, your mind is both the prison and the key. So what does this internal battle actually look like? Well, it's framed as a choice between two ways of living. On one side, you have the ego-driven life. That's described as being materialistic, disconnected, and, you guessed it, easily controlled. On the other side is the soul-led life. The soul here is presented as your authentic self, the inner voice of truth and compassion that connects you back to that supreme oneness we talked about at the beginning. Now, to make this idea feel more real, the source leans heavily on the work of biologist Dr. Bruce Lipton. It uses his research in epigenetics to argue that our beliefs aren't just abstract thoughts. They're powerful signals that can actually influence our biology, all the way down to our DNA. The claim is that, quite literally, your beliefs create your reality. So what's the actual game plan? The theory lays out a 4-step path. First, you have to shatter the illusions by recognizing the matrix for what it is. Second, you heal your own inner wounds by taking full responsibility for your state of mind. Third, you reconnect with your soul to cultivate a higher consciousness. And finally, you embody compassion and become a positive force for change in the world. And that all leads to this one final, provocative question that completely flips the script. After detailing a reality that sounds like a prison, the theory asks, what if it's actually a classroom? What if all the control, the suffering, the illusion, what if it isn't just a trap, but a grand lesson designed to teach us who we truly are? It's a question meant to shift you from a state of fear to one of empowerment.